All right. Hello again, everyone. I'm Jack, and I'm back for SocioPathos, a channel dedicated to educating everyone on my experience with ASPD, as well as cultivating a discussion around mental health. And first off, holy shit, we already blew past 100 subscribers. Thank you so much to everyone who subscribed. 100 people already is beyond incredible, so thank you all so much for that. This is the second Q&A, which I am titling Living with ASPD Q&A 2 Electric Boogaloo, I guess. So let's just get right into it. But first, I want to clear something up so that I'm not misleading anyone further. A few people in the comments have mentioned that I couldn't have been diagnosed for ASPD at 17. That is true, because you can't be officially diagnosed before you're 18, but that doesn't mean I don't have ASPD. I'm 19 right now, turning 20, and the last session I had with my mental health professional and therapist was when I was 18. In my previous video, I had said that I was diagnosed when I was 17. This technically is not true, as I had pushed my therapist during one of our sessions to give me an offhand account of what he believed I had, and ASPD was his answer. That session was around a month before my 18th birthday, so it's not that far off at all in the first place, and even still, I'd gone back to see him a few months later to confirm his beliefs, and obviously nothing had or has changed since then. However, it was super dumb of me to say that he diagnosed me at 17, and I'm really sorry to have misled some of you that I was already 100% verifiably diagnosed by a psychiatrist. Because I don't want to mislead people in the future, I'm planning on going to confirm my therapist's beliefs with a licensed psychiatrist sometime soon. Hopefully that clears some of that up for those of you who were rightfully disgruntled by my lack of context, and once again, I'm very sorry for not being more clear. Also, thank you, Henry. I am a bit of an edgelord by nature, it's true. And yes, Eric Delgado, I was reading a script in my first video because I had written it. Consolidating my thoughts onto a Google Doc does not make them any less genuine, my good man. And guess what? This video is written down too. Whoop-de-doo. Look at me, I can break the fourth wall. Wow. Also, shout out and thank you very much to Osai Igbinenikaro for leaving a very cordial response to that concern. You and all the other nice people like Moon Cookie are why I do this, Osai. Thank you very much. Anyway, now we're going to answer a few of your questions in depth, starting with Dr. Dan Dungus, who asked, would you be willing to talk about what led you to go to therapy in the first place? I'm really interested in that because I hear most people with ASPD don't tend to go to therapy willingly. I feel the same way about a lot of the things you described. Should I seek treatment on my own or just wait until something negative happens in my life that leads me into the direction of therapy? Thank you for the question, Dr. Dan, and I actually think this is a bit of a funny story, at least in my slightly twisted sense of humor. So, during my junior year of high school, my parents got divorced. They were very cordial about the entire process, and my sister actually took it a lot harder than I did. To me, that fact was obvious because although I was unaware of my parents' internal struggle at the time, the initial shock of learning about their soon-to-be separation still wasn't enough to evoke any true, deep emotions or sadness from me. I sort of felt this odd moment where I thought to myself, I guess we're on that side of the 50% instead of the typical, oh shit, my parents are splitting up response. At the same time this divorce news hit me, I had been slipping in my grades in high school because I just simply didn't give a shit anymore. School had always been beyond boring to me, so once junior year classes actually required some studying and memorization of topics I hadn't learned about independently, I began to slip in some classes. Pretty much only math class, and the rest turned into B's and C's, but that's not really the point. So my dad, seeing my decline in grades just as he told me he was getting divorced from my mom, declared that I was depressed due to the divorce, and that's why my grades were dropping. He didn't care at all when I told him I just literally didn't care about school. It had to be post-divorce depression, which I didn't even really understand because I wasn't the one getting a divorce, so I actually felt bad for my parents and wanted to stay normal and chill for their sake. Which, by the way, wasn't hard at all because I don't feel anything if I don't want to. Anyway, he really wanted me to go see a therapist, and even though I thought it was unnecessary and a waste of time and money because I'm very self-speculative, I agreed if I got a video game or Wendy's or some shit. I don't know, I didn't want to leverage too much during their divorce. I'm a pretty simple man. Give me food, entertainment, including the internet, and a roof, and I could pretty much be happy forever. Anyway, I ended up going, and my first therapist was a lady who really didn't seem that good at her job. I went in, talked for nearly an hour straight, getting an occasional nod and a vague follow-up question, but I could immediately tell it wasn't doing anything for me. It felt like talking to a brick wall whose pockets just got a little thicker, and it really didn't resonate with me. I complained to my dad that I didn't think she was right, and after a few more similar sessions, we found a new guy. He ended up being really responsive and insightful, he listened thoroughly, and I truly enjoyed conversing with him. By the way, the reason I initially thought therapy would be ineffective was not because the practice itself wouldn't work or wasn't effective, but because the practitioner wouldn't be able to fully understand my totally analytical point of view like my first shrink had. Luckily, he was super smart and pretty damn chill, so I didn't have to constantly keep my guard up like I'd assume everyone else with ASPD does constantly, unless they're low functioning and can't help it, or are with people they can really trust. What I mean by that is essentially very few really smart people are easily offended, weak-willed, or manipulatable, so to me it feels as though they're real people and not just NPCs. These people tend to be loved, like in my case, because I enjoy the company of equals, or despised by people with ASPD who I guess don't like people who they can't get something out of and manipulate. I wouldn't know, I'm not an asshole, I just know that I could do it if I wanted to. But anyway, if my muted emotions and empathy does make me do something assholish, smart people like my current therapist are the perfect people to be talking to because they won't immediately become irrationally offended by some over-the-line thought that slips out. So due to their intelligence, I feel as though I can more easily confide in them. But that's just me. And to cap off this question's answer, which has gone on way too long, Dr. Dan, as long as you're feeling okay and truly know yourself, there's no inherent need to seek out therapy. Therapy is always good, if you can find the right therapist for you. So go find a therapist you enjoy talking to and see if you think the experience is worth it to you personally. So, if you have a premonition you may have ASPD and want to talk to a professional, please feel free to find a therapist that works for you. What's most important is your mental health and the well-being of your reality. Thank you very much for the question. I hope that helped, Doc. Next question is from Christina, who asked, do you find yourself unintentionally giving socially acceptable answers to questions about ASPD because of your desire to erase the stigma? As someone with an anxiety disorder, even I try to make it seem less frustrating than it actually is when I am trying to explain what it is to others. So I imagine with ASPD that could be likely too. Awesome question, Christina. I've given socially acceptable answers so far, not because I'm stretching the truth and want to erase the stigma, but because that's simply my truth. One of my general life goals is to never lie about what I'm thinking to myself or others, especially to you guys. But I probably do unconsciously filter myself a lot because I chameleon to whatever is socially acceptable as to never draw negative attention to myself. But the point is, I don't want to be hiding the difficulties and intricacies of having ASPD at all, because if anything, I want to magnify those topics in my experience as a hopefully informative viewpoint for all of you. Also, I don't want to 100% erase all the stigma either, because people with ASPD, especially people with bad impulse control or anger management, can be incredibly dangerous and ruthless. Imagine a Terminator. Now, instead of giving it a living exoskeleton, you just make it a person with its own personality. That's someone with ASPD. For a crappy analogy, sociopaths are Arnold Schwarzenegger, who are able to learn to feel, and psychopaths are the T-1000, ever morphing to manipulate reality and the people around them for their benefit or cause. So yeah, to answer your question, Christina, even being on the nicest end of the spectrum isn't without its frustrations, and I sometimes feel a little non-human, but I never lie about my thoughts. If I ever do, it's really, really rarely, mostly because I couldn't care less about how people react to me, and more so just because I don't need to be, because most of my thoughts are pretty darn benign. I hope this answered your question, but it's really hard to convince people of your genuinity when your whole personality trope is being able to freely and dispassionately deceive others. Well, what can you do? Next question is from Colin, who asked, I can disregard my feelings, but I feel like that's something a lot of people can do. Am I a sociopath? That is true. Disregarding your feelings is something everyone can do at certain times. However, there is a difference between disregarding and completely eliminating feelings. When I am presented with feelings, such as from a piece of media, I have to actually consciously decide to let myself feel those feelings, like opening a valve so the emotions can flow. I can also perfectly replicate and experience real emotions of my choosing at any time, but this is still a skill and I have trouble making myself cry because sadness is one of the emotions I feel the least. Essentially, I can go full robot mode at my leisure, so if you can't do that, you're probably not a sociopath. If you have any other concerns, please feel free to ask more questions or see a mental health professional, which is always a good thing if you need guidance. Thanks for the question. Next question, we have Gentleman Plays, who asked, I have heard different definitions for psychopath and sociopath. I thought psychopaths had a genetic disorder and sociopaths develop the disorder. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is, if I'm not mistaken, a common misconception. All people with ASPD can either be a sociopath or a psychopath. The distinction lies in not being born with or developing it, but rather whether or not they have a conscience. People are reportedly more likely to develop ASPD through some type of trauma or bad home environment, but to my understanding, it's something you're born with that's mostly hereditary. For me, I've always known I was slightly askew even from a very young age, so if you ask me, no, I'm pretty sure you're born with ASPD and the distinction lies in the specifics of how the individual is able to act with and manipulate their empathy and emotions, as well as whether they have a conscience. That distinction has always been clouded and very loosely defined, so it's a tough question to answer with anything but you're born with it for the most part and it's on an individual basis. Hope that clears some of it up. For the next questions, we have Jafcam, who asked 3 questions and we're just going to go down the line. Number 1. Is the spectrum larger than simply high functioning and low functioning? Yes, it is a spectrum, so it's highly variable. It depends on whether you're a socio or a psychopath, which is already loosely defined, and then on a litany of other factors that delve into the highly personal. So I wouldn't be able to tell you anyone else's spot on the spectrum without conversing them and asking them directly. To be honest, the spectrum was something I came up with to help you visualize the general consensus DSM-5 definition of ASPD and who on that spectrum is more likely to be spontaneously deceptive or even dangerous. The line between high and low functioning can also be blurred with stupidity, inflated pride, or rage, and it's a really broad spectrum for something defined in such a binary way. 2. Would you describe your relationships as transactional, or are they more genuine, emotive relationships? I don't look at my relationships in that way, but in a sense, I see every human interaction as transactional. You trade your time for everything you do, so any time spent with anyone for any reason is a sort of transaction. Even just being someone's friend is trading your thoughts for theirs and vice versa. I'm sure some people with ASPD sometimes see people in this way, but for me, it's only ever if it's like a glowing neon sign above their head that reads easily manipulatable for both parties' benefit or my benefit and not a noticeable deficit for them. Stuff like that is usually in the back of my mind, but I only ever act on it if the situation is typically mutually beneficial. I don't know, I guess I'm just a symbiotic type of sociopath. And 3. What are your goals for the future, perhaps career-wise? Well, my goals for the future are really loosely defined because I've learned how not to disappoint myself. While I don't really set or think about goals often, I do plan on doing something, anything, that both helps people and entertains them. If the help they need is advice or simply entertainment itself, so be it. I'm happy to make others happy. Simple as that. When I'm old, I don't want to be rich necessarily. All I really want is to be able to afford all my hobbies and make people's days better. I think that's a pretty virtuous goal if there is any. Career-wise, I've been working as an editor for a little while now, and while I love filmmaking with all my heart, I've always wanted to either play, coach, or commentate in esports. That's one of my biggest hobbies, so I'd say becoming a gamecaster would be a career I'd love to pursue. Thank you for asking, Jafcom. That was really nice of you, so thank you for that. Alright, and those are all the questions I'll be answering in this specific video. But before you go, I hope you know what we're doing. End round bonus feature! Welcome to this video's end round bonus feature, where I pick pieces of media I think are relevant or awesome and recommend them to all of you for no other reason but to spread the love. Today we have a kick-ass alt-rock track by Royal Blood, Little Monster. This song kicks tons of ass along with being really relevant to how I think as someone who looks unassuming but can be really nasty if I need to be. If you enjoy Royal Blood, I also highly recommend Out of the Black and its music video, which is incredible if you haven't already seen it. And if by chance you already know about Royal Blood, instead try out The Midnight Gospel on Netflix. It's a podcast from Duncan Trussell, animated by Pendleton Ward, the genius who made Adventure Time, so it's incredibly cerebral. If you like to use your brain and you enjoy animation, it's a must-watch. If you want something a little more on the dark side, I recently found out about Junji Ito and his horrifying manga. This one is the Enigma of Amigara Fault, and it's haunting to say the least. If you like comics and surreal horror, it's a must-read. Links to those, as always, down below. And there you have it, that's it. Let me know what you think of the bonus feature, ask me anything, and I mean anything, as always, in the comments. And make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, as well as subscribe if you want to stick around. Thank you again to everyone who subscribed and asked questions or left comments so far. You've blown me away. One final question for all of you. Should I make a community Discord server so that we can chat and discuss mental health or anything else you'd like? With all that said, stay safe out there in this wild world we all live in, and see you next time on SocioPathos. Peace. Alright, time to edit this video. Woo! Editing, oh my god. It's so much fun. I have so much fun editing these videos for you guys. Oh, also, if you're sticking around still, sorry for not uploading in a while. I've been working on 2 other massive projects, so thank you for waiting so patiently for this video. And once again, I love you all, so thank you. Peace.